So in this section, I'm going to talk about computer security. Now, computer security is kind of a scary, sort of dramatic topic, but it doesn't need to be. So I'm going to talk about some of the most important cases, and in particular, staying safe is not that hard. It doesn't need to be that complicated. So for starters, I want to establish this model of the computer. I'll say the computer is sort of like a castle. So let's say here I've drawn the computer, and there's the CPU, and maybe here's a hard drive or a flash drive or something with bytes on it that you care about. And let's say you've got your secret diary.txt. There's some bytes here that you care about. So I'm going to say it's like a castle in that the computer has this sort of, I've drawn this bold border around the side. Like it has a real a wall, and the bad guy's out here. He's outside the wall. Now in the movies, sometimes it seems like, well, the bad guy just drives up in a van, outside your house, and they have some gadget, and then, they just do something and they just get the bytes off there. And that's just not how it works. By default, the bytes are on the computer. You've got the computer. The bad guy's out here on the outside. Like, by default, it's kind of safe. Or put another way, when we look at the different things the bad guy might do, they all involve being on the outside and trying to get inside. But by default, they're outside. So what I want to do is talk about the different so-called attacks that the bad guy might do. One sort of broad pattern I want to emphasize is that it's not the case that there's a bad guy with a picture of you sitting in some apartment, like scheming how to get onto like your computer. Generally, the way it works is that the bad guys are working what you would say in bulk. They don't know about you. They don't know about anyone in particular. They're just crafting not fairly medium complicated attacks and then just sending out millions and millions of copies of that attack. Not putting any thought into any particular one, just trying to snag essentially victims who have taken the least precautions. So if you just do, it's not that you need to have super awesome security, you just need to avoid making very common mistakes. And if you just avoid the common mistakes, you're probably going to be okay. I should mention that sometimes for like corporate espionage or whatever, you might get a government or someone who's trying very hard to break into someone's computer. That's sort of a different class of thing. I'm not going to worry about that case. Presumably, if you work for the CIA or something, you've got your own class. So the first class of attack I'll talk about is password attacks. So the bad guy could try to just guess passwords to get into someone's account. So, Gmail or whatever. I'm sure this just happens all the time. This is sometimes called a dictionary attack. The idea being the bad guy could just sort of, aardvark, acre, just sort of like go through every word in the dictionary and just guess it. There's 86,400 seconds in a day that kind of give, if they were to guess a password every few seconds, whatever, you could go through quite a few. The trick here to avoid password problems is you just need to avoid very obvious or very common passwords. So your password should never just be a word that appears in a dictionary or a pun or a little bit of wordplay that someone else on the, many other people on the internet might have thought of. So actually, I can show you an example of this is sometimes called a dictionary attack. Maybe I said that. So actually, this is a real example of a dictionary attack. So I run the codingbat.com server, and it just turns out bad guys are trying to break into that thing like all the time. So it keeps a log file of just what's happened. That's a standard thing for servers to do. And I've just put a copy of the log file. So it's a little cryptic, but I'll walk you through it. So what this says is on March 6th at 6:26:20, it says failed password, invalid user Alex from some IP address. That's actually an IP address in Japan. So what that's saying is there was a login attempt and it failed for the user Alex. And then 2 seconds later, there's another one. And then, 4 seconds after that, there's another one. So the Alex 3 times, and then there's a failed one for Adam and for user fax and whatever. And so this kind of shows you the sort of bulk quality. So there's just some bad guy machine out there, and you can see every 2 or 3 seconds, it's just trying another password. And it's just always wrong, right? It's just guessing a word in the dictionary. I mean, what are the odds that that's going to happen to match? It's very, very low. But that's how the bad guys operate. It's not that they have a high percentage idea. It's quite the opposite. They have this very low percentage idea, and then they just try it a very large number of times. So it's also, I think, funny that you can see they have sort of a list of usernames to try, and it's kind of alphabetical, right? Like it's just totally bulk. They're just going through them So that's just kind of, so that, I guess, not to be too scary here, but that's just going on all the time, right? The bad guys are just trying every server they can find every couple seconds, whatever, just like constantly. So as I'll talk about in a second, if you just have a password that's just a little bit hard to guess, you're totally fine. They're only guessing the most obvious kind of passwords for that sort of attack. So here's, I thought it was interesting. I just looked up a list of just common passwords. So here's, I'm sure it depends on how the survey is done, but here's some common passwords. So the number one common password was the word password. Number two was password 1. No doubt that's when they require you put a number on there. And some of you out there may have actually done that. Or here someone has password 1 through 9 or 1 through 8. Or here ABC 1 2 3. It's not a word, but it's kind of a pattern. It's pretty easy to imagine a lot of people trying that password. Or QWERTY. Another example, someone's trying to be clever, but if you're clever in a way that like a million other people are going to have that same idea, then it's not clever. So those are all password patterns to avoid, right? You can't pick something so obvious that other people might try it. So the good news is that having a secure password, it's not really that hard. And some sites, in my opinion, really go overboard, requiring you have a bunch of digits and multiple punctuation. I think they're fooling themselves. I think that is excessive. So I'll just give you some examples of what, in my opinion, represents good passwords. And I should say, I use good passwords for, the bad guys are really interested in sites that involve money. So banks, eBay, PayPal, or your email account. Your email account is important because the bad guys can then trigger a password reset, which is then sent to your email account, and then there might be some other barriers there, but that's maybe a way for them to get at the account with money. So those are passwords I regard as important. And then there might be some other, blog where you want to comment or whatever, and I don't put a lot of thought into using a real secure password for that. So I'm conscious of passwords where I care about security versus kind of, whatever, throwaway passwords. So here's what I do. Start with a word. Here I use the example mittens, just some random word, and I add a little misspelling. Change the letter, mess it up a little bit, so it's not quite right. And then here I added comma ERX, just a little random something in the middle or the beginning and the end or something, so it's really not a word anymore. That's pretty good. It's important here that the ERX, it's not like ABC or XYZ or something that anyone else on earth would have thought of. It's just really random jumble a few letters. So this kind of password I find to be pretty easy to type. If you want to get a little more fancy, you could start adding some uppercase letters, maybe put a digit in there. A lot of sites require digits. Or if we want to really go over the top, we could have like multiple uppercase letters and lowercase and multiple digits and punctuation, whatever. That's probably more complicated than is necessary. So those are pretty good passwords. There's another problem, which is instead of the bad guy guessing the password, it might be that the bad guy, let's say they break, I'm going to use schwab.com as my example a lot of times. So what if they break into schwab.com and they sort of get all the passwords from inside of there? And there's some technical details about how that might work. It's important, for that reason, it is important that you do not reuse important passwords. If you did reuse it, then there's this other problem, even if it is hard to guess, where it could kind of get stolen, not from you, but essentially from someone else. So I don't reuse important passwords. This does create a problem where they're really hard to remember. And I gotta say, what I do is I just write them down. Like you could have a piece of paper somewhere, somewhere obscure in your house, and for the important ones, just write them down. And I find that to be adequate. You have to realize, again, it's not that there's some bunch of, the CIA or something is trying to like break into your account and hiring people to break into your house and get the passwords. It's more, there's just this mindless bulk and in a way very inexpensive operation going on, just trying to take advantage of common cases. So I'm not so worried about having those written down. Also, if you were in the hospital or something, it might be helpful for other people that they could get your passwords. Alrighty. So that's the first class of attack, password problems.